Hey everybody, welcome to the Pipeline Integrity Show. I'm your host, Hussain Fadhel. We just finished off a wonderful interview with CHANTAL GRAMLICH, where we discussed the past, present, and future of recruitment in the world of pipelines. Hope you enjoyed this interview, and see you soon. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It is with a great deal of pleasure I get to introduce our next guest on the show, CHANTAL GRAMLICH. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. Thanks for coming on. If you could please start us off with an introduction.
Yeah, of course. So I am here in Calgary. I work with a staffing agency, so we're called Tundra. I started with this agency about 2 years ago. So I kind of fell into the recruiting world, as most do, I think. I have a background in HR, so found it difficult to sort of find my passion and thought I'd give recruiting a try. So here I am a couple of years later, still loving it. Typically what we do is on the IT and engineering side, where I found most of my success was in the energy sector, more specifically within pipelines and midstreams. So that's kind of been my bread and butter for the past couple of years now. I'm working with both owner and operator companies on the pipeline side, as well as a multitude of other roles. But I think we're here to talk about oil and gas and pipelines today, so I'll sort of stick around that.
So thank you, Chantal, for that. So I guess the theme for today is to look at sort of the past, present, and future of recruitment in the pipeline industry. And I know it's gone through many roller coasters, and there's so many interesting situations we've faced. So why don't we start off with sort of historical, or not historical, but the recent past of the good old days back in 06, 2012, or 2014. Of course, I'm removing the great financial crisis in 2008, 2009. But anyways, what was it like recruiting back then, and how easy was it? And if you could remind us of the good old days.
Right. So I'm slightly newer to the industry, so a lot of this is verbatim for what I have seen, but I can definitely speak to what was sort of happening around like the 2012, 2014, back in the good old days era, as you would say. I would almost describe it as that was an environment with like unlimited opportunity. So a lot of people were getting paid very well. They were getting offers from companies across the street for a couple extra dollars more. They were jumping ship. It was quite easy to find work. Everything was all good. I know even myself, at that point, I was working as a summer student up in Fort McMurray. And I was way overpaid just for the 4 months that I had to work. And then the next year they weren't even hiring. So I think expectations they were reasonable for the time, but it almost gave everybody an unrealistic expectation of what the industry can be and what to some people should be, I guess. But since then, I'd say it's been a slow recovery. I know I was doing a bit of researching last night and I found the quote, "Recover means to regain what was lost," or something like that. So in terms of recovery, I'm not sure if that's something we ever fully recovered from. And I know we're going to get a little bit into what's been happening in today's world as well. But yeah, I guess is what you could consider being recovered versus regaining some of that stability. So we've definitely, before COVID hit, we were definitely on the uphill, if you will. I think things were recovering. People were getting more comfortable with what the new environment looked like. Rates were obviously sort of a little bit lower than you would see. I'd say they were still probably 15 to 20% lower than you might see back in the good old days. But it's sort of the new reality, right? And I think we were just sort of getting our feet back on the ground. Everyone was able to take a breath. And then 2020 happened. So I won't get into that quite yet, but if you have any questions regarding that, we can definitely chat a little further.
Yeah, no, that's a good start there. I mean, I kind of joined the industry around 2012 or so, so I came in around that time, and I know things were really booming, and you could do anything you wanted, go anywhere you wanted. There was never enough people, it seemed, so it was an interesting moment. So I know after 2016, there was the sort of first oil shock, and I think things, oil being around, I think it went up to about 60 to 50 to $70 a barrel and such. So even then, I think never really fully recovered. But anyways, let's talk about March 2020, COVID strikes. What's changed since then, and
Right.
You know, I guess what happened in the hiring market?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, like I kind of said, when we're talking about recovering here, it almost felt like in January this year to me, it was like, okay, we're good. Like the oil and gas industry seems stable. It might not be what it was, but we're good to go type thing. And things are still looking up, right? And then when March hit, I guess when everything went on lockdown, I'd say, I don't want to call it like a halt, but for everybody, it was almost like a halt for a couple months there, and people kind of need to sort out what they needed to do, what changes they needed to make. So I was lucky enough to be in the midstream sector. From what I saw, midstream did stay quite stable. I think it's, yeah, much more viable, I guess, in the upstream in the current economy. So we did still see quite a bit from the midstream, but it took them a minute to sort of get their feet on the ground and catch their breath. But in that, of course, we did see some like market rate reductions and things like that. So going back to like January, when I would talk to candidates and potential people for roles, they might be asking for like ridiculous rates at 15 to 20% more they saw back in the day. They were still hanging on to that. That's what they're worth, right? I was paid this amount once for my skills. I can totally get it now. Whereas it's almost been a flip in mentality. Once we hit March and we're getting into this year, you see people who were once making that amount who are now willing to jump into junior or intermediate roles for a fraction of what they were making just because they're looking for the work. But that's also not always the best strategy, right? Because that's not at the end of the day where you're going to be happy, but it's a little bit of a ego check, I would say, and a flip where people are now accepting what the market rate is and recognizing that this industry might not be the heyday that it once was. I do think it'll always be there. And I think we're starting to get our feet back on the ground and recover. I think we're in recovery right now. But as for March being hit, it was obviously tough across the board. And I think we saw a lot more of those repercussions maybe a bit later on, like even just in the last few weeks here with some of the bigger companies in Calgary. Because it took them a minute, right, to figure out how they were going to run efficiently and leanly in the new environment. They also evaluated what rates they were paying people and what the market actually indicated. So a lot of adjustments were made. I do remain positive that those adjustments were made somewhat proactively as well. So I hope it's not something we continue to see in the industry, but rather an adjustment to what's happened, and that we can keep going that route and people can stay remote and keep doing their work. But yeah, I try to be positive, of course. It's not, obviously, if I compare this time last year to this, or I guess where we were at last year compared to this year at this time, it is a completely different world. But in terms of how other industries were impacted and such, I mean, people were still, for the most part, able to continue working full time and do those jobs, but every industry was impacted. Of course, some are going to be hit a little bit harder than most. But rough year all around, yes. But I do expect good things, hopefully, for 2021.
Yeah, so I guess after sort of the March shock there, and then into August and July, like you're saying, I think there was a bunch of companies who were sort of evaluating and doing you know, research into their costs and all that. And then yeah, I think recently there's been some certain amount of layoffs in the industry, especially in Calgary. But in terms of you know, the remainder of 2020, I know there's not much left, and maybe even into 2021. What do you see? What do you think is the outlook, and what do you think is the sort of guess of what midstream hiring is going to look like?
Great. So just to speak for myself personally as to what's on the horizon, right now we're mostly, I guess, dealing with pipeline projects. So I mean, for the most part, I mean, we're doing work on TMEP, KXL, CGL. So those are still in the works, right? The price of oil might affect it to some capacity, but the pipelines still need to be built and they're approved to be built. So we're definitely looking for people in the field on the contractor side and on the owner side, as well as a little bit in Calgary. So it's not going to stop, right? So they're still going to construct those things. And at the moment, it might be surprising to some, but we're turning away people every day who are fighting for a job with some of the contractors we have who might not necessarily have that pipeline experience. So I know there's a lot of people looking to get out of the industry, but there's also a huge amount that are looking to transition into the industry. So I think that's a really good sign.
Perfect. And how about in terms of you know, greater than 2021 into maybe 2025? I mean, I know it's all just a guess, but what do you see is coming down the pipeline in terms of opportunity types? So, are companies looking more for field people, you think, or do you think, I have a lot of viewers that are engineers, of course. So, what does it look like for engineering opportunities, project managers, project engineers in the next couple of years? Again, obviously, your best guess.
Yes, yeah. So no experts or genius here, but I mean, looking at the current environment we're in and the type of hiring that we do, we're hiring on both the owner and the contractor side, right? So typically, if you have that owner experience and you're looking in Calgary, yes, things are slower, but companies, like I said, they're stabilizing. They still have projects that need to be done. They might not be hiring as aggressively, but they're still operating. They're still hiring, right? And then in terms of what's busy right now would be, yes, those field roles with the contractors who are out there actually constructing those pipelines. And then going forward, I'd say for the next 5 years, I mean, in hiring in general, we're going to see a huge change when it comes to remote work and the type of industries people are looking to get into, and relocating, I think, is going to be huge as well, like especially when we're talking about all the contractors we have building TMEP right now up in Hope, BC. There's definitely a lot more people open to those types of roles who will go work for 6 days a week at 12 hours and potentially relocate to Hope because that is the work available. So it's almost staying flexible and being open to different types of roles that might come. So yeah, if you've been in the office and that's where you're comfortable in Calgary, but maybe consider that there might be something in BC. There's pipelines being built in southern Alberta that if that might work for you, if you do want to be in the fields, unfortunately, maybe that is where the bulk of the work is right now. So a little bit of change in mentality, I guess, and an openness to new sorts of things.
Yeah, so would you say there's a lot of opportunities for field engineers as well as just maybe, I know there's a lot of sort of construction, laborers, coders, welders, welding inspectors, but is there a plethora of like field engineers or project engineers needed in the field?
Yes, so I'd say for the most part, when we hire engineers in the field, that will be with the contractor. Because when we're working with the owners of these projects, typically they're hiring out those services. So yeah, a lot of times our contractors are looking for those technical people on site, and then occasionally our owners they obviously need their contact on site as well. So we of course have some pipeline engineers up in the field. We have people up in Smithers, Fort St. John area, and then as well as Kitimat and Hope. So there's definitely more need for, I'd say, like the construction labor side of it, but you're always going to need that engineer on site, right? So there's for sure opportunity there.
Excellent. Yeah. So I guess I had some questions regarding maybe some of your advice, some of your wisdom, if you could share with us, like, in the current environment and moving forward, what do you see is going to really is the difference between sort of a successful candidate and an unsuccessful candidate? Let's say they have similar skill sets, but what makes one successful over another?
Right. So I can speak from personal experience here in terms of when I'm speaking to candidates directly. Majority of people that we are hiring actually aren't coming from applicants of postings. And I think that's the case for most organizations and agencies in general. Because when we post a role, we might get 200 or 300 applicants in today's market. If I'm looking for a pipeline integrity engineer, I probably have admin assistants and IT people applying to that posting, right? So a lot of times it's not even a matter of having the skills and standing out in that way, because my job as a recruiter, I can find maybe that handful of people who've applied and do have the skills for that role, right? It's my job to be able to see that. So I think my biggest advice would be taking it that step further than just applying online. If you can, if it's through an agency, reach out to that agency. There's definitely recruiters at every agency who will talk to you about the position. They'll give you more specifics, like who knows, it might be a field role or something that you're applying for and you don't know that, or it could be a matter of even like location or pay rate or something, but those are details you don't know why you're getting eliminated. You don't know if the company even looked at those applicants, to be honest. So who knows if a human even saw your resume, to be honest. So in that sense, what I could most recommend is just making sure that you are identifying everything on your resume. So if you are applying for a role and you're like, yes, I have 100% of these skills, are you showing 100% of those skills in your resume, or are there gaps that are missing? Because as a recruiter, my first step is to look at your resume. It's not chatting with you, right? So I don't want to disregard you because I need a pipeline integrity engineer who's done, say, inline inspections, but you only have stress, corrosion, and cracking on your resume. I don't know that. I might just put your resume in the I'll talk to them when I need somebody for stress pile, right? So in that case, include everything.
So
Include
the
works
pile
for
the
projects
pile
you've worked
exists. The pile exists then, right? There's that giant
on.
pile.
There might be a rejected pile, but I know you also brought up ATS, and that's definitely something I wanted to chat about. Because I know when I used to be applying for roles, I've heard about this scary ATS system, and I literally thought, like, when I was putting a resume in, there was like a robot putting my resume in that bin already, right? But I think for myself and for our agency, and I think is the case in most organizations, that doesn't happen, right? Like you're not going to apply to a role and a robot's going to throw it in the garbage, right? Like a human at one point is going to look at your resume and we're the ones making those decisions, right? So at that point, it's read the resume as if you were a hiring manager or if you were someone like myself. So if someone's looking at your resume, can they actually tell you've done pipeline integrity projects for XYZ companies and you've done all the applicable technical skills, right? And in terms of the ATS, when it comes to actually searching, because like I said, we're not typically finding our applicants, I guess our applicants through the applicant page, we're actually actively looking for them. So all we're really doing, and I do have a video on LinkedIn about this as well, but all we're doing is searching keywords, right? So if I'm looking for a pipeline integrity engineer, I want someone who's done inline inspection. I want someone who's done stress, corrosion, and cracking. There's certain regulations and everything I'm looking for. I'm just including a few of those keywords in my search, and really the only way the ATS will be responsible for you weeding you out of that search is if you don't have those words in your resume, right? And then the only other advice I could give is, I guess, formatting it in a way that those words will get pulled out. But in my experience, there's never been like a PDF document or weird format that hasn't been able to tell me that these 3 simple keywords are in someone's resume, right? So I think the ATS is best beneficial on our side. We can do quick searches like that, but it's not some scary monsters that's just going to throw your resume in the garbage before it ever gets looked at. So I also think it's the cause, or I guess the scapegoat for a lot of blame as well in the hiring process, is people can say, oh, it's just the ATS, it was just the ATS. But have you actually went beyond applying for that role online? Do you know if somebody actually reviewed your resume? Do your best in whatever that might mean, if it's a recruiter at an agency or if it's reaching out to someone at the organization and finding that right person. What is this role actually? Are they already interviewing for this role potentially? Because I know roles can be posted for months, right? And the case might be they have an offer out already for that. So maybe you're applying to things that are too old and they're not even looking at applicants. So there's many reasons, but I would say the ATS probably isn't your biggest culprit here.
Well, I've heard stories of so many different tricks, and I'll share one. Tell me if you've ever seen anything like this. But people take like the job description and then they make it like font like 0.25, like the whole thing, and then they'll like put it in white font, and then they'll stick it into the footer of the resume or something. So like every word, I don't know. There's some silly things going on, but
And to be honest, that might
I'm not,
work. So say I'm looking for the word pipeline integrity. If you're an admin assistant and you copy and pasted what pipeline integrity engineers do in the footer, your resume might pop up, but then I'm looking at it and I'm going to disregard it, right? So where are those words, right? So,
right.
but that's what I mean. It's a sense that it's recruiters are using an ATS. We're putting applicants into the ATS, but it's never the deciding factor or yeah, it's never going to implicate whether or not you've actually applied to the role or someone sees your resume. So it's really all about keywords, to put it simply.
Sure. Another sort of question I get from our viewers is, you see a lot of well, maybe they're recruiters or not, but they call themselves like resume experts and cover letter experts and LinkedIn profile experts. And so, they can charge whatever, 300, 400, maybe even $1,000, who knows? But, and it's fine. It's a business. But what's your opinion on finding out maybe someone who's good at doing that, and would you recommend that as a recruiter? Do you think it really improves someone's profile and chances?
Right, and that's, again, it's like any service. It really depends what your value is to that service and what you're looking to get out of the service. So obviously there's going to be people who might say that, who probably aren't going to do a great job of editing your resume, but you might find somebody who's worth that value. And I guess it's evaluating what that value is worth to you. So I really look at it from like a return on investment perspective. So I'm a huge advocate for coaches and hiring people to learn any sorts of skills. Why not learn from someone who's done the same thing you have? And it's almost, instead of like going back and getting more education or something like that, it's like, hey, here's this thing I want to learn. This person knows how to do it. I'm all for that for sure. But you also have to vet that person. Are they really going to give you the services that you're looking for? And yeah, what are they charging? So if you're looking at maybe a resume writer and it's the opportunity for an interview or a job, what's that worth to you? It might be worth $80,000 to $100,000 a year. To me, that $300 or $400 to help you land that position, definitely worth it, right? I might not pay someone $3,000 to edit my resume and get nothing in return. But yeah, when it comes to things like that, I think it's definitely useful. And it's also just a matter of discussing it with people. They could bring up key things in conversations that you've had no idea to try before. And it could be the matter of, yeah, landing that interview versus not. And same with interview coaches and things like that. It's going to give you an edge and it's going to improve your skills to some level. And with LinkedIn profiles specifically, it really depends where you're going about your job search, like where you want to focus. So I advocate for LinkedIn, obviously. I think we're both all about the personal branding on LinkedIn. So I think it's huge, and that is where people are looking to hire and where recruiters are hanging out. So yeah, if it's something that you don't know how to do yourself and you want recruiters to be reaching out to you on LinkedIn, it's more than worth it. And you can make your profile visible and you can start using LinkedIn as a networking tool. But that, along with that, you have to be willing to kind of put in that work and actually go above and beyond and do those sorts of things. But huge, I guess, returns from that I would see compared to just applying to a bajillion roles online. If you can talk to someone, actually get a coach about how to go about, like I said, if you want to get in touch with the hiring manager, if you see that pipeline integrity engineer posted, it's like, where do I even begin going about finding who's the person behind this role and who do I chat with? So that's another skill entirely. And that might not be something you're able to learn on your own.
So maybe if you could just give us a little bit of, again, your wisdom on exactly what you just said. There's a posting, let's say pipeline integrity engineer at some midstream company, fine. There's 1,000 people looking at it. What would give someone really the edge? How would they possibly get in touch with that manager or increase their chances really of networking successfully in a situation where they don't know anyone at that company?
Right. And I think what I can really wrap all this up into is just about targeting your search. So going back to your point, like there's thousands of people looking at this posting, and like I said, maybe 200 people applying, handful of those are qualified. Are you one of those people, or are you targeting your search? So I'm not saying go apply to a role that if you don't have 100% of the qualifications, it's not like you shouldn't apply. But is it actually a role you could step into and do? Or are you just applying for something because it's an open role and you want a job at the moment, right? Because there are 200 applicants and there are people who have actually done those things and who are well more suited. And that even comes down to targeting like your level of expertise. So I'm sure you've chatted with them, but I've chatted with a ton of senior level people who are looking for roles and they're beyond frustrated because they're looking at junior and intermediate positions. And obviously that's going to be frustrating, like them getting passed over. They could do the role in their sleep. But why are they getting passed over? Because there's actual junior and intermediate people applying to that role, right? So it all comes down to targeting your search. It starts with the resume. You're not going to copy and paste the job description, but you're going to look at what the job description is asking for and definitely add those keywords in how it applies to your work experience and tell that story on your resume. So obviously, structuring your resume and having a strong resume is huge, but it's also getting to that next step and targeting your search in a way that you can advocate for yourself almost. So don't conduct your job search in a way like I've applied for 1,000 roles this week and I've got no calls back. Like, why am I even applying? I'm defeated. Instead, look at what your skills are, what companies you'd be good at, and actually target specific companies and roles. Like, obviously keep an eye out of what's available, but if you know a certain company hires pipeline integrity engineers and that's who you want to work for, start making the connections now. And that's where you can use LinkedIn and recruiters, is just talking to people in the industry, figuring out what's going on there. And if you talk to enough people at your hopefully soon to be company, that's where you're going to make those connections, and you'll come across the right person eventually, right? Like I'm in sales. It's almost the exact same thing. Like as a job seeker, you're selling yourself. You're in sales, and of course I have a ton of meetings every day that might not have I guess a strategy or a solution at the end of them, or a plan of action, but I'm still meeting people, and I'm definitely benefiting from them in other ways. So the least you can do is go chat with people. And maybe once you start chatting with people at that organization XYZ, you find out that they're never going to be hiring, they're on a hiring freeze, whatever. So it's like, maybe I'll move on, instead of, who knows, applying to roles that are months old, applying to roles that are not applicable to you, just getting defeated based on things that are possibly out of your control, but you might be blaming it on things like your resume. So it's also really finding out where you're going wrong in the process. Is it your resume that needs to be fixed, and you're good at everything else? You've done all the networking, but it's when they see your resume, is that when they're turning you down? Or is it you're good at the networking part, and then, yeah, things fall apart somewhere? So it's really honing in and targeting on what you need to do, and also what's applicable and good for you, right? You can apply to roles all day. I mean, if I were to ever lose my job, I could apply to a million entry-level positions, but I don't think I'd ever get them, right? Because my experience is beyond that, and there's entry-level people out there who want to do that work and who would do way better than me.
Yeah, one of the other questions that I know, especially during, when people get laid off, a lot of the times they go back to school, or, during COVID, there's now so many opportunities to learn online, for example, maybe specific to pipelines, but even in general, if you could, would you advocate for, upgrading your credentials? I mean, I guess that makes sense. That would be a yes, but, what are maybe some of the sought after credentials that employers are looking for, and specifically in the world of pipelines?
Right. So in terms of just in general, upgrading your credentials in this time, I think absolutely. Like, it shows that you've put an initiative, you've taken this time to do something and improve upon your skills. But same way I'd look at like a coach or investing on something, right? You got to look at your return. So don't go take some IT course if you're a pipeline integrity engineer, unless it's with a software that potentially companies are starting to use or something like that. Yeah, you want to make sure it's valuable to you at the end of the day, right? Like, is it something that you're seeing constantly on job descriptions? Maybe it's a certain qualification, and that might be the reason why you're being rejected, is because you don't have that certain designation. Yeah, if you're a pipeline integrity engineer, probably a great time to start studying for a PEng or something if you're eligible. In terms of industry specific, though, it is a bit more difficult when it comes to like pipeline things. You're probably more of the expert here, but I would say definitely like going after like a PMP designation or things like that, like anything that'll just give you that extra credential and those extra skills. But you also don't want to waste your time getting certified for softwares and things you might never use. So tread lightly, of course. But yeah, I'd always recommend like a PMP designation, or even like Pro-C for change or things like that. There's ample opportunity to learn new skills.
Yeah, one thing, I'll add to that I've found very interesting in terms of pipeline integrity, but it seems like it's true for a lot of positions, is data analytics and data visualization. So knowing like, how to use Power BI or Tableau seems to be very powerful almost for any role nowadays. So, I'd like to ask you about sometimes, I guess, especially with layoffs and such, but whether it's oil and gas in general or people in the pipeline industry, it's possible that things will maybe get back to where they used to be. And like you mentioned in the beginning, a real recovery, or as Larry Kudlow, the economic advisor to Trump, says, super V-shaped recovery, right? He's delusional. But anyways, people maybe get a bit disheartened, or maybe realize that it's not worth maybe being in oil and gas, or maybe being in pipelines. So could you talk a little bit about and give us some advice on what are some of the potential industries that oil and gas shares transferable skill sets with, that would be worth going into? And of course the big question everyone's excited about, sort of renewables. So maybe if you can speak to that as well.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's always difficult when it comes to changing industries. Obviously, some of the bigger things we're on the lookout here for in Calgary. Like as for myself, I'm definitely one of those people. I do like oil and gas, and I've thrived in the industry, but I'd like to diversify my book of business as well a little bit. But I still say, I mean, we're always going to need energy, right? So there's still a huge focus on the energy industry. So yeah, that is going to be things like utilities and renewables and solar and those sort of things. So I know a lot of our renewable clients right now, we're working on like the solar generation and the wind farms and things like that. And that is where the struggle does come, because like I said, like there's a saturated market of candidates right now. So say we're looking for somebody to build a big wind turbine. Pipeline integrity might not fall into that so well, but even if we're looking at, say, like civil engineers or project managers or something, the unfortunate reality is you're still going to take that person who's worked on the solar generation projects or the wind turbines before over somebody who's maybe worked on oil and gas. So that's where it is a little bit unfortunate. But in terms of overall, like I also do see like a lot of our clients and our energy companies exploring those different avenues, right? So a lot of these people who have exclusively relied on that oil and gas are now, I had a meeting today where he was talking about like hydrocarbons and like hydroelectricity and those sorts of things. So in terms of, I guess, switching industries, it can be difficult, but highlighting your transferable skills, I guess, is key. So when it comes to those sorts of things, like I was saying, like project management, project engineering and stuff, like you are looking at a lot of the same stuff. But the hard reality is technically you won't beat out somebody who has worked on the same thing for 10 years. But you can try to get that experience elsewhere. So like you said about gaining those credentials and stuff too, like take on, I don't know if you can take on projects in your spare time or even just learning about these different industries and stuff. And I think in a way recruiting might change in that capacity as well, because more people are doing these types of things and getting coaches. So we might look at that and say like, oh, hey, they haven't actually actively worked on this, but they were involved in this sort of project before, and they have done these sort of things and have at least made themselves familiar. And as well, I guess if your company is getting involved in those sort of things, which most are, if you have the opportunity within your own company to get involved in some of those newer type of projects, if they're saying, hey, we're doing renewables now, jump on it, then you're going to get a whole nother aspect to your resume, right? So, and it's completely different as well if you're looking for contract work versus permanent work. So if you are looking for something permanent, I think that's where you might be able to hop industries a little bit easier, because companies are going to invest in a permanent employee a little bit more than a contractor. They're going to train you on the industry and things like that, whereas a contractor is usually expected to come in and hit the ground running. So that's where you can kind of differentiate in your job search as well. Is this a contract position for some sort of major project? Is this a employee position where they're going to orient me and train me and things like that? So that's doing your research and targeting as well.
Yeah, perfect. No, thank you very much for that. I've sort of run out of questions here, but is there any final tips or wisdom that you'd like to share with us, especially in this time of, people being laid off, I guess, within oil and gas? I know midstream is doing pretty steady comparatively, but we've also had some losses. But yeah, anything you'd like to share with us to end it off?
Yeah, I think, I guess, to summarize, the most important things here would be really targeting your job search. If you need help doing so, figure out who can help you do that. If you want to chat with recruiters, like I said, Tundra, we do a lot of work within the energy industry. Other agencies might just deal with IT work, right? So you want to also vet who you're talking to and who you're working with. There are people who will be able to help you out and people who might not. So don't get defeated if you are having a conversation with a recruiter who can't help you, or a bad recruiter. Honestly, there are some out there. So don't get defeated by those sort of things. You can
No
find
way, there are no bad recruiters.
none of us are bad. But yeah, that's part of the reason I do well, right? Because there's a lot of people out there providing my service that aren't great at providing my service, as with a lot of other things. So really finding out who's going to help you in the industry. And to be honest, especially talking about Calgary specifically, our industry is so small, and I find there's so many overlaps and stuff like that. So if you're just meeting people, getting your name out there, you're going to get to the right person eventually, right? It's networking, and that goes hand in hand with finding out who those hiring parties are and things like that. And then as well, it's just remaining flexible and open to what is out there, because there are people saying no to things because the rate's a little bit low, but maybe you need to reevaluate. in terms of, I'm not saying to like undervalue yourself, but take a look at what you actually need and what your skills are worth in the market right now. Because to be honest, if a recruiter is maybe offering you $70 an hour and you're still fighting for that $100 an hour, a role might never come up that's able to pay you that. So it might be a matter of not accepting something that's below your value, but recognizing what your value truly is in this market, being open to those sorts of things, and being open to contract work as well. Because I do see a lot of people who are still hesitant to take on that contract work. And I think that's one of the biggest changes we saw after like 2016, is that people weren't, before that, like I said, they were hopping from place to place. It was so easy to just find work elsewhere. And then afterwards they were, no, I want something stable. I want something permanent. Employment, right? And then so there's still very much that mentality that a permanent, I use quotations around that, position offers stability, right? Whereas, yeah, I don't want to see people saying no to contract work because they think it's short term or not stable, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if the work is there, it's there. If your project is going to continue, it's going to continue. And I believe you can get laid off just as easily as a staff employee versus contract. And I think is, as a general shift, kind of like you were saying, from 2021 to 2025, we're probably going to see a ton more gig work or like a contract economy. So those are things people are going to have to be a little bit more open to, and maybe not just decline those opportunities right away because they don't exactly fit what you're looking for. That might not ever be the case again. So.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I know you're a very busy person, so I appreciate you coming on. Last thing, how can people reach you if they have more questions? I know your videos, other videos on LinkedIn with really good advice for networking, we'll link it in the description below. But in case people want to reach out to you, ask you questions, how can they reach you?
Great, yes, of course. So I'm primarily on LinkedIn. I'd say that's what I use the most. So anyone in the energy industry, for sure, that's where we're posting most of our roles and things. So on my LinkedIn, I also have a link to our job board, our Tundra job board. So that's every role that we have available currently in the industry. And then if you want to chat with me a little bit further as well, I can provide my email through LinkedIn and we can chat further about resumes and things like that. Because we actually are developing a energy focused community. So it's more so a job board and a community specifically for your type of audience, right? So it's people within the energy industry. We're spanning across Canada. So it's utilities, nuclear, renewables, a lot of pipelines, mostly pipelines here in Calgary. So that's something you can join and be more exclusive to the stuff we have going on in energy. And then we're also, I guess, eliminating those hundreds of applicants who might be on our other platforms. So it's a bit more of an exclusive community. But yes, for sure, reach out on LinkedIn and then I can get you in touch. We have plenty of recruiters here who are working on our things. So someone will be happy to reach out and chat with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate the chat. Thanks so much.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that interview. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, keep on pigging, digging, repair-a-coating, and backfilling. Take care.